Right, 3, 2, 1. Hey, welcome everybody. This is the Weekly Jargon. I'm Abel Perez.
Jose Rodriguez.
Rohi Zachariah.
And together, we're the Jargoneers, fellas, and we're here another week. This week is actually special, though, because unlike the last couple weeks where we've been kind of split up and everything, we finally get ourselves in the same room. And when that happens, some magic happens, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so you're in for a treat today. Today's a special show. Share this video, like it, leave your comments. Most importantly, today we're actually going to be talking about a lot of local issues, and maybe not dive so deep into all Madera specific things. But one thing that people are always asking are like, how do things work, right? The relationship between a community member, a staff, maybe a city staff, all the way up to your city councilman, which Jose Rodriguez is here, and then maybe even on like the planning side, and we have a planning commissioner here as well with Rohi, right? So we're loaded with, or I'm blessed to be surrounded by Madera greatness here. All right.
And Abel is a modest guy, but he forgot to mention that he's also part of the Civil Service Commission, right?
For the county, yeah.
And tell us, Abel, what exactly the Civil Service does and how important it is to our community.
So the Civil Service is, think of it as a kind of like your sheriff between your county HR and staff and your employees, right? So when an employee feels like, hey, you know what, this isn't fair, right? I was disciplined or I was let go, I'm going to appeal it. And so they're appealing it amongst their peers, which is a civil service commissioner. We are selected as community members to represent the staff, right? So that's probably one of the bigger components of it. And then also within there, we're also doing things like approving job postings and determining whether or not we want to accept certain reallocations of job titles and modifications to like job summaries and details and things of that nature, right? So it's actually pretty neat to see, and I've had the opportunity to kind of be sticklers sometimes where it's like, some of the verbiage may be, maybe a little bit unfair or uninclusive for certain candidates, and so that's kind of been an opportunity for me to say, wait a minute. If we word it that way on this job description, we're going to eliminate potentially good candidates for this position. So why not do it this way, right? And of course, we have our council attorneys and things like that to all button it up, and so that it's all clean. And by the time it gets to the public, it's nice and polished. So,
and that's why the Weekly Jargon is such a great show, because it's a lot of common interest that we three share, right? Rohi, you sit on the Planning Commission, and can you please elaborate a bit on what exactly goes on at the Planning Commission?
It's not as in detail as what Abel gets to do. He's got a fun job, it sounds
what's
like.
the importance of the Planning Commission, especially?
Planning is we're kind of the future vision of the city. So we get the future applications of, could be building permits, it could be people looking to open new businesses. And we get to be somewhat like your guys, a little bit of a policing of, do we feel that's a good fit for our community for that particular area? Are there any things that like maybe limitations on like hours that they're open if they happen to be something serving alcohol? So it's a way to kind of not just let it be the Wild West of I'm going to open and do whatever the heck I want into my business, like I was educated early on. It's to kind of help. Maybe somebody opening a flower shop and then 6 months down the road they're selling cigarettes and then they turn into something completely different than they originated from. So that's
it's about like conditional use, right?
Conditional use, yeah.
So I mean, in a broader sense, you have this general plan that the city follows, right? Every 10, 15 years, you have a general plan, and the current general plan that we have was established back in 2005, and this is how the city's going to grow. Where exactly it's going to grow and what they plan, as far as land use, zoning, and what have you, and that's what Rohi does. Rohi has a very important piece of this whole how this city or municipality works, just like you, in that we have to make sure we abide by that plan. So that plan was called the Vision 2025. It's coming up on its expiration date, and it's certainly due. It's overdue. Because the city is continuously growing. We just annexed Village D, which is proposing over 10,000 units. So a Village D, when you think about a village, what exactly are we looking at a village? So for those that are familiar with Riverstone and or Tesoro Viejo, think about this twice as big, because that's how many units are going to go into this village. And when you're planning something of that growth, then you have to have a set of plans on what you expect, what kind of land use. Will you have industrial? Will you have residential, multi-unit, open space, parks? All those things have to come into place, and that's kind of the vision of how Madera will grow. So the Planning Commission, again, make sure that we're abiding by that plan, and all the permits and or planning uses are going through him.
Yeah. And I think that's important for the viewers out there to understand that that's how things work, right? Oftentimes we hear people say, "Why don't they put this right? Why don't they build this right?" And I think I've reminded our viewers a few times throughout different episodes that it's not the city or the county who decides who comes here. The first step is the business has to decide if they want to come here, right? And then they inquire, and then they go through those channels, right? Yeah. So then, I've seen part of that Vision 2025 where the city's stance on what a building should look like if somebody was to build something brand new, right? And I think we call them elevations, right? There has to be a certain amount of elevations, and so if you don't know what an elevation is, that's what the building looks like eventually, essentially, right? How many pieces of material are being used? Not just a tin building, but you got your brick, you got your stucco, you got and maybe you got wood, right? And I think it's maybe they try to make it at least 2 or 3, right? Yeah. Where 2 or 3 different materials. Because typically with that type of design, you're getting a higher quality, more attractive type of building. And so as we try to grow the community or build in the community, and we're accepting these applications saying, yeah, you can build here, we don't want people to build cheap and junk, because any corporation will, right? Because they're about saving money, right? So it's like, well, if we can be in your market and just build something like bare minimum because you don't have these requirements, then we're going to do that. But that's the initiative of Jose and his colleagues at the city council to say, no, this is the expectation that we have. And then the city council appoints commissioners like the planning commissioners. And so that planning commissioner essentially carries out that same vision, or is in line with the vision of that councilman, right? And so if you are out there and you're saying, well, how can I do that, right? How can I be on the commission? It does start with being involved within your district, right? Get involved within your district, your city councilman or woman or whoever, whoever's representing you. You'll want to start having that conversation, right? And identifying, maybe how can you get some experience and, maybe be considered for that type of position. But ultimately, Rohi, you're an extension, just like I am as a commissioner. We're an extension of the people, right? The people vote for city council, the city council person to be in place, and then that city there, and then with that vote, they're saying, we want you to represent us with our vision, and we want you to represent us with the selection of these appointed commissioners, right? So I just wanted to break that down for our viewers out there, because that's a very real question, right? How can I be part of that, right? And how does all that work? How does that person get to sit there, right? And just like I said about, the first step of a business coming into town, it's not the city or the county that has to engage them. It's typically them who have to show interest, and then we have. So same thing for you. If you show interest and start engaging your elected officials, you could certainly position yourself to be considered for such a position.
And that's one of the things is that, you have to know your government. A lot of the times you'll hear that, oh, well, government doesn't do that, government doesn't do this. And I'm speaking within our city, our local government, not necessarily what's taking place out in the country, but here locally is we do offer like a citizens academy, right? And this has gone through the police department, where you can get to know your police department. What exactly goes through that process of what they do in that department. And then there's another academy that we go through to know your government. What exactly are the components to government? How does government work? What does it operate? What are the services that it provides? And how you can engage and be part of that is important. So for us, I think you said it best, the general plan, we try to follow that. You can't have an LMM processing center within a residential area. That's just not smart growth. It's not smart planning. So stuff like that is the reason why you have these general plans, is to be able to let people know this is how the city plans to develop itself in the future. And we always try to look ahead 10, 15, 20 years. Hence why it was a Vision 2025 that was established in 2005. And with that, we try to abide by that. So everything that we do, every item that we bring before the council, if you notice at the very bottom of the item, it'll say consistent with Vision 2025, and here's how. And you'll always try to link it with one of those pillars of what we wanted to see with the Vision 2025. So it's well overdue. I think we as a city, and I think we acknowledge that as the Madera, maybe by the time you were born, you probably seen Madera with maybe 20,000 people in population. You're about, what, 30 years old?
34.
There you go, 34. So 34 years ago, or maybe even back 35 years ago, the population wasn't as big.
Yeah.
Over the last 2-3 decades, you've seen the population increase in Madera. So with that comes, well, what are we doing, right? You've seen some county rural areas, and this is where we, the city council, and our counterparts across the street, the county, have to come together and say, well, if you're planning to extend and grow within this sphere of influence, then it's a smart idea for us to kind of align our ways of how we want to see growth, right? Because essentially at some point the city will annex this part of the county and it'll become city. So what can we do to work together so that when property is developed, it aligns and conforms with, not necessarily the exact same zoning but it has a very like-minded aesthetic to it, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I can give you examples of like, for example, the ranchos. I don't know that the city will ever get there, but these are spread apart and they have their own different types of zoning, right? 2 1/3 acre, and you can build stuff out there, but there's no curb and gutter. You don't have a system where you can go directly to city utilities, like a wastewater treatment. You have to have your own septic. You have to have your own well. So these are kind of things that with the planning that you have to consider as you're incorporating a land that's already been developed, right? So,
I see, if you're obviously a majority of our viewers are from Madera. And so, you could kind of vision this with me. 2 points. So the first point I was thinking when you were saying population, I've always disliked how Madera considers our population because our county is so integrated, within the city, right? So it's kind of false, like, we have 72,000 people in the city or whatever it might be, and it's like, well, no, there's more like 200,000 because all of these people in like the country club, Madera Acres, they're all feeding they're all using Madera resources, right? The city of Madera resources, restaurants and things like that. So that's kind of like always tricky because our county lines are we have so much development just on the other side of our lines, right? Within that let's say like 5-mile radius or whatever. So it's so dense. But my second point is like, if you want an example of that, drive down Road 26, right? Or what's that called? Country Club or the
Country Club.
Yeah, you could drive down that, which it turns into it is Road 26 essentially. But you can go through the city, and you can see Dutch Brothers, right? Newer buildings, the Vallartas, right? Newer buildings, and there's quality there, right? Across there's shopping centers, quality buildings. As you get almost immediately once you get to the county, it's shit, right? And those, I mean, aside from Matilda Torres, right? That's a very beautiful building, and they have some new commercial retail spaces right before that, and those are new, so they're decent. But you see everything else, and it's just ugly. Right, even all the way up to the Dollar General, which is a newer store that was put in just maybe like 4 or 5 years ago. But it's your tin building, and I think they made them put some flowers and stuff like that out there. But little tiny parking lot, tin building, and that's where it's like, wait a minute, man. We have to identify that we're growing out that way, right? And it just doesn't fit now, right? And now how do you, how much more money is it going to take to replace all of that, right? Because now it's not just bare land, you just build up. You have to, essentially remove that, because I'm sure a lot of those buildings are going to be out of compliance, and just not attractive for the type of retail that could potentially come in there, right?
Yeah, and you would call that something like a legal non-conforming, because it would probably be non-conforming to today's standards and zonings, but once you acquire it annex, you're annexing it almost in a grandfathered way, right?
Yeah.
You're bringing it up. Now, if you go in there and do any structures to it, then you have to conform to today's zoning standards and or building standards. So, for example, and that's a good example. If once you pass the Tractor Supply, you'll see a division there. Even the roads are changing, right? You'll see the pavement on the roads, right? Welcome to the city limits, and it's probably because it was paved up until the city limits, and then you have county roads.
Correct.
And you'll see that sign. But as of recent, we on the LAFCO, because I also sit on LAFCO, we annexed the part of the Matilda Torres all the way to Martin Street.
Yeah.
So that now belongs to the city, and essentially that'll have to conform to city standards. If there's any request for building, will come through Rohi first and
Which
say,
there has
hey,
been, yeah.
So Rohi, we want to build this center out there. Okay, well here are our zoning, first of all. These are our building standards, and if you're going to pull that kind of permit, here's what we want to see. Right. And the landscape and or elevations have to look like this, right? And now that's how you start integrating your design process with the general plan. But unfortunately, when you do acquire property that's been developed, it's really hard to change that. It is going to cost a lot of money, because taxpayers a lot of money too if you wanted to put all the curb and gutter if it didn't have it. Luckily, Country Club it was designed with 4 lanes, so it's in good shape. But that's a good example, and that brings us back to the original. When we started introducing ourselves, is that understanding how your government works, especially when you sit on one of those seats, then you understand that you're only one of maybe 5, one of 7. And a lot of times I'll hear, hey, well, why can't you do this? Why? Well, I can certainly voice your concern, but I still need to make sure that resonates with the rest of the council. And that's why I encourage a lot of people, when you do have concerns that are legitimate concerns within our jurisdiction, you should come to our city council meetings that we hold on the first and third Wednesday of every month. They start at 6, and do your public comment. That is your right as a constituent or resident to give your voice your concern. We want to hear, because if we don't have all our ears on every single aspect of what's taking place in the city, but when you go there in front of the council, now you have seven different set of ears listening to your concerns. And whether you want to do that in person, you want to do that live through Zoom, or you want to do it through a written communication, you can get that done. Just visit it. Again, the city council meetings are held on the first and third Thursday of every month at 6 p.m. You can go online, madera.gov, and get yourself informed. Get involved. And I don't mind the moaning and whining. That's great. But if you want something done, then make yourself, make a presence and let us know what it is. Because out on the social media platforms, of course, I can say whatever, and it gains a lot of attraction because people feel the same way. It resonates with something, and that can gain a lot of attention, which is great, because we also have our ears to the ground listening to what's taking place, and we'll bring it back to the city manager or whatever department that's lacking. And I think, there were some comments about certain things with parks and what have you. We had people go out there yesterday, and that was a great thing. It was good to hear that, hey, certain things are happening within the parks. We're not getting the feedback. Well, good to know. I didn't know that. But, again, I may not pay attention to the social media platform that you like. Like I said, our generation, we talked about this. I'm more on Facebook. This may be on Instagram or TikTok, wherever it may be. But there's nothing like being present there, again, through Zoom, in person, and or writing, to let us know how your city's doing and what we can do to make it better.
Well, go ahead.
No, you also have to be careful as an official. You can't also use that as your information sometimes to make those decisions. It's good to be informed and maybe ask the questions to the city to get their official response. But you can't say, well, I saw on Instagram that these guys were doing something dirty, and that's why I'm not going to vote for them. It has to be vetted, and
Yeah.
it has to go through the process.
There's,
as
a,
well,
there's
so.
a formality to everything, and especially in government. And, and we opened this off talking about local government versus your federal government and your White House and stuff. And I think sometimes people, as people, we become so passionate in the whole like Republican versus Democrat, debate, right? And where Trump or Biden, who are we voting for, right? But a lot of those decisions that are happening at the White House, yeah, sure, they do trickle down and affect us, right? But your vote is, I hate to be, I'm not saying don't vote or anything, but I'm saying you have much more say locally, right? You have the ability to literally walk into a council meeting, a supervisor meeting, a unified school board meeting, and talk to the people directly. It's public, go on record and be able to voice your concerns and actually maybe change somebody's mindset on, man, I was going to vote yes, but I hear that. You know what? And that makes a lot of sense. And if they feel that way, how many other people do? Because now I'm starting to feel that way. I have to vote no, or I have to table this. I need more information, right? There's a whole saying like, no news is good news, right? So if you have an agenda, if you for you viewers out there, if you're thinking about like an elected official or somebody who's making a decision, right? And you have an agenda, okay, we have to approve these items, and nobody's throwing a fit about it. No news. Well, it must be good news. Everybody must agree with it. Okay, it makes sense. Why not approve it, right? But the minute, and you could probably, confirm this, is the minute somebody steps up on that podium during public comment time and they're passionately, saying this is wrong or this doesn't work, it does set you back a little bit. And you're like, whoa, wait a minute, what? How can somebody be so passionate about this? I haven't even heard that point, right? But that's the opportunity that's given at these public meetings. And at the Civil Service Commission, I know that's especially true. We have our consent agenda items, and usually you approve all that as a whole. But as soon as you get why is there 50 people in the crowd right now, and they're all just they're all ready and hungry to voice their opinion. And we've had that a couple times, and when it happens, you respectfully say, okay, well, we hear you, and we're not just going to pencil whip anything today. We need to look into those concerns, right? Mm-hmm. So let's table this, and let's get the information that's necessary to take all matters into consideration. But if you're at home and you're waiting for the decisions to be made, and then the building to go up, and then you're one of those people that complains after, it's too late. Mm-hmm. It's too late. It's already happened. So you can literally get yourself part of the planning without being on planning commission by being involved and showing up to those meetings, right? You can be essentially influential on the city council without being a council member yourself by attending these meetings and speaking up during public comment. That's huge. I wanted to transition, Jose, you were talking about, we would call it politics, right? The community member, we'd say, oh, you're a politician, right? You always know what to say, and you're just giving me a square answer, right? You're just giving me a square answer. You're telling me what I want to hear, and or you know what? You should have stood up for yourself at that meeting because this person said this, and you should have tore him up, right? So there's like this tug of war between board members, and this is, man, I experienced this like at, the Madera Evening Lions, meetings, or Madera Young Professionals, whatever board I've ever been a part of. It's almost healthy to have that tug of war, right? You don't want everybody just saying yes and agreeing everything. You want these different ideas and these different outlooks, and that makes typically a stronger board, right? But Jose, I wanted to get your opinion, and Rohi too, because you guys are each within your boards or commissions, what's that experience like? How do you foster those those emotions and everything? And what's actually the motive there to try to work together, right?
Well, think about it this way, Abel, and I'll give you an example. You said something earlier about people wanting to engage in politics and wanting to engage in their community. Just the idea of you coming up to a public comment and speaking to the council is very intimidating, very, like you get very apprehensive. And if you haven't done it, I would put that in your bucket list to come out and just say, you know what, this is one of my biggest fears that I have, and I'm going to overcome that by coming to a public meeting and saying what I feel about the city. And that's a public comment. It's within our jurisdiction. You're fine. Well, no different for that person that's up there making a decision that sometimes goes against the grain. So whenever you hear someone come up there passionately giving you, and you have to make a decision, well, there's some apprehension as well. I mean, you everything that you believe in, is being tested, and tested in that, am I doing the right thing? Am I doing? And here's the biggest thing that I try to do is, am I doing what's in the best interest of the community, of the interest of the community, or am I doing it in the interest of myself? And you fight with that. That is a tug of war. You're fighting with that because in many cases you have your own personal opinions of what you think should be done. You have your own personal ways of looking at how this city should be, how it should manifest. But truthfully, I mean, you're one of whatever you hear out there. If the majority of the population is telling you don't do that, don't do that, then and you go out against it, then you have to be able to support that. And that's the biggest challenge is when you're up there. There's 7 people with 7 diverse backgrounds. I mean, similar, maybe some culture, traditions, and what have you. I think we all have similar values, but at the end of the day, there's a split there that not everyone thinks the same way, and it's very it is when you have to go home and you feel like you may have done something differently. It's hard for you to go back home and sleep on that. So it takes a lot of time going up to that item because it is a big item. People are up there, protesting or whatever the case may be, and you have to look at it and weigh out. Well, I know staff brought me this report saying that this is in the best interest of the community, but I agree with such and such person because it's affecting such and such deal. I mean, you have to weigh that out. At the end of the day, try to keep and this is what I say, try to keep my personal opinion out of it and try to put myself in a neutral so that I can weigh out what's in the best interest of the community. And sometimes, I don't care who you are, sometimes you do, and sometimes you fall victim of that, where you're kind of looking at yourself and saying, man, that's not what I should have done,
Well, I think one decision in favor of one person is always against another, right? So
Correct.
It's like the old saying, you can't make everybody happy.
Yeah.
But I always like to water things down. I don't want to say dumb things down, but water it down to where, metaphor and analogy or give an example. So if you're listening out there and you're thinking like, well, what do you mean? It still don't make sense. My first realization that everybady's different, but yet everybody's opinion really matters was one of my first gigs as a manager. It was down in Bakersfield, 2012, 13. And my team of 8 did really good, right? Our results were really good for the month, and we were just we were ready to celebrate, right? So I said, all right, I'm gonna take everybody out to dinner, right? We're gonna go have a nice dinner. Now, what I like, right? You said you gravitate to what you like. I like steaks, right? And that's a reward for me, right? So I thought, oh, we're going to a steakhouse, right? We're gonna go to a steakhouse and we're gonna eat steaks, and man, everybody's gonna get a nice big fat juicy steak, right? Well, then quickly, you start hearing about, well, I'm a vegetarian, right? One team member's a vegetarian. So now it's like, okay, well, I have to take that in consideration, right? Because here we are at a steakhouse and I have to respect that, right? And then it's, well, I have these allergies, right? These peanut allergies, things like that, right? And so you start realizing that just because it works for you or just because it's your preference, it doesn't mean that there isn't some different perspectives that you have to genuinely take into consideration, right? And so that's when as you're explaining that, that's how I see it, right? It's like, yeah, I love steak. Yeah, I want to go there and I have no problem with it. But then you have all of these different factors, different perspectives. So, well, I don't, right? I don't like steak. I have an allergy. It'll affect me. It'll, this and that. And yeah, you might be available that evening, but I'm not available that evening, whatever the case may be, right? So anyway, just trying to get, just trying to create a visual for you guys so you guys can kind of understand that, there are a lot of different components that drive into
And
this.
Rohi can tell you. I mean, you've been part of the planning commission. You've seen when certain things just quite don't mesh, and you have to kind of. I mean,
Well, I mean, that was like with In and Out. I mean, that was probably our most contested item, I feel like, since being on there was, obviously we knew that community wanted In and Out, and we're not going to deny it, but we fought over the littlest thing, which was that little pork chop turn there, because that was one of their demands, is that they wanted to make sure that left-hand turns could be made there between them and Panda. And, as a commission, we all agreed that we can't let that happen because we could see because again, we live in Madera, we're here, we travel that street every day, concerned for, accidents and traffic issues. But, it was something that we couldn't deny the project because they had to have it, they said. And at the same time, we had to find out a creative way to make it work. And it really kind of came down to an agreement that they were going to address any issues that would come up, that they would take responsibility, that if there started to be accidents or traffic, it was going to be on them because this was your thing.
Would that be like where they would have to bring in a street light or something? Or?
It was mostly like if we had to do, like if they had to bring staff, either extra staff, if they had to do maybe like they realized, maybe like Wednesdays, maybe because of the flea market there, maybe that they need to not allow that turn on that day. There would have to be an open discussion to say, like, we are addressing the issue now. We're not just going to say, hey, it's a free-for-all. It's too bad that, this is happening.
Yeah.
Which it is happening. I mean, if you follow some of those social media posts, there are turning into be more accidents right there at that corner. So I'm sure that discussion is eventually going to have to be had as to what are we going to do to address that? But that was, I would say, one of the harder decisions to make because, again, we knew the community wanted this. We as a board want this because, I don't think there's too many people that were against having an In and Out there. So it's how do you reconcile that? You know?
And Rohi, just on that same topic, what the concerns about closing down a monument or a restaurant that was a local favorite? I mean, that must have really got to some of you.
That was kind of like the early meetings,
But did they come to comment? Did they come in waves and droves to try to get that? And this is where I think Rohi could explain how this whole thing kind of
again, it's like you would say, well, like, people who know you're on there, you would start seeing them in the community, especially as before this decision was made and the topic was coming up, is, they were trying to voice their opinions outside of the meeting and just say, hey, basically what you're saying, how can you guys be considering this? There's a business already there. And it took, understanding obviously what was there and what could be there and which one's the better fit.
Long term.
The long term, exactly. And that's, I think, the harder decisions you got to make is you have to believe that you're making the right decision. I'm not making it, I don't have stock in and Out. I don't know the people. I have no interest in myself. Yeah. But the community as a whole has been begging this for, 10 years now plus, that we want it In and Out. And again, like you said, is as a decision, part of that topic, we said, well, can you go anywhere else? Is there anywhere else that this would make sense? Because we know this is such a contested area. And they said no. They did their research, they did their marketing, they did everything they needed to do, and that's the spot it has to be.
And that some might say, well, why is that left turn so important? Think about yourself on vacation with your family. Dads especially, all three of us were dads, right? We're always in a rush, right? Like, let's go. We gotta, quick, fast food. You get off right there on Cleveland. Well, there's In and Out, Dad. Okay, well, I have to go all the way up to the stoplight. And then maybe I didn't get in the right lane, the left lane, and, we're going to McDonald's. It's right there. Oh, we're going to Panda, whatever the case may be. And, In and Out, these guys are experts. They see things like that, and they say that little minute detail can cost us millions of dollars.
Yeah.
Right? That's very interesting, but good points, Roy.
Yeah, and, one of the things that I will say, you brought up a really good analogy with the steak.
Mm-hmm.
I appreciate that because in many cases, that is the case. you may have one or two people that like the steak, and they don't really care about, well, you like salmon? Shit, not here. This is a steakhouse, buddy, and we're gonna eat steak. And a lot of times that's the attitude that you may see. And I'm not saying that it happens here in Madera. It happens everywhere in the political arena. Locally, we care about what happens locally, right? But it happens too much. We see this too much in our national politics, that you almost have to pick steak or chicken. You know, there is salmon, but typically it's steak or chicken. Right?
And you might want to have salmon.
Yeah,
but you can't because there's only two options. Yeah.
Exactly, there's only two options for you. But you know, in our case here, I like that analogy because it's true. You know, yeah, okay, you like steak, but there's other people that may be vegetarian.
Yeah.
Some people like salmon. Some people like chicken. And now, how do you work with that? What kind of a menu do you have to bring in there? Because typically, there's only one menu in the city of Madera, and that's the only menu you're going to get. But I mean. And you look at this even at a higher level is like, well, same thing comes with resources, right? I mean, we've been getting these resources. The city or this county has been getting these resources for decades. I mean, years beyond decades. And now there's a shift in how do we transition some of those resources to try to get it to some of the more disadvantaged areas, right?
Yeah.
That we can try to make this or boost this. There's your downtown. There's your east side of Madera, the parks and what have you. So sometimes, you know, when you don't look at trying to provide resources for the majority, then that's a problem. You have to look yourself in the mirror and say, am I only providing resources for a minority? You know, and I'm not talking about necessarily race or ethnicity. I'm talking about all social classes. You know, you have to look at it that way. And sometimes it's the hardest thing to really contemplate and say, am I really doing that? Or am I preserving, again, something that's been in place for many years? Have I been conditioned to believe that this is the right way to do things because it's been done like this before me? My predecessors do that. So there's a transition that's happening, and there's resistance in that. You also have to put yourself in the shoes of the person that likes the steak. Why does he like the steak so much? What is it about that steak? Why can't he just say salmon? You know, there's something in that steak. I mean, he's been brought up with steak, right? This guy loves.
Where's the beef? Where's the beef?
Generations of steak. His grandfather cooked the meanest steak. His dad perfected it, and now this guy bought a what? What's it called?
A Traeger.
A Traeger. Yeah. And the Traeger, if you don't know, that's the state of the art type of really smoke, right? So that's what I'm saying is that analogy works best. But I mean, there's people that are going to like chicken. They're going to like salmon, and you have to open, but you also have to put yourself on the other side and look at it and say, what is it about? Why is it that steak so important to them? Why are they holding on to that steak so much? It could be survival for them and their family. Yeah. Whereas people that like the chicken or the salmon saying, "Hey, share some of that. Share some of that."
Well, right? I don't know where that's going, but I will say,
and it may be going too deep into it, but I'm just trying to make sure that
I'm gonna name this episode "Where's the Beef?"
Yeah, where's the beef?
Well, I will say the pushback to that would be when we get like in these meetings when we get our the city response to why we should make these decisions. There would always be comment throughout these meetings of, well, you know, this is what we did before, and the city got it wrong. We'd always keep getting reminded that the city got it wrong. You know, the people before us got it wrong. And it makes you want to almost doubt now everything. You almost want to say, well, I feel like I'm going to do it right. But you got that division. Did it go wrong because the guy sitting up here made the decision, or did we get it wrong because the people telling us what to do got it wrong? And again, why, like, you know, one of these that we'll see how it plays out as it goes, but we approved 16-inch north. There's going to be a gas station. And part of the recommendations was to completely put a center divide from 16 or Schnorr east, and essentially making an island out of where Furnessi's used to be and that gas station is. And it was frustrating because it had to do with traffic concerns and that what's going to be going in there eventually. But you know, understanding that as even though I have no investment interest in those businesses, how could we as a city, essentially like putting a wall,
a roadblock to those businesses,
and now the only way onto or into that business would be from eastbound or westbound traffic essentially coming either off the freeway, which they're going to
Right.
disappear, or coming from the gateway, I guess. And it was frustrating because we're fighting the city at this point. We're telling the city like, hey, we think this is a terrible idea, and it's, well, no, it has to happen, and this is the traffic report, and now you're talking about legal issues if we buck the traffic report, and essentially came to a negotiation of, we won't put it now, but it's probably still going to go in the future.
Yeah.
You know, and
To
that was
mitigate-
one I couldn't sleep on because, you know, I didn't like that.
You're crippling one gas station for another, right?
And not only that, but I mean, when you open up these things, obviously the attorneys start having to kick in, and they started, well, the city has no obligation to, you know, basically the well-being of a business just because of a traffic issue, essentially. So it was kind of frustrating to kind of see that kind of response of, look, we're basically gonna, like, this is gonna be a dead business because there's no way. Because I told them I frequent that gas station. I go there. That's where I fill up, and I'm coming usually up Schnorr and making that right-hand turn. And if all of a sudden I can't, and the only way is I have to now go down and flip a U-turn, just like you were talking about before, I'm going to go somewhere else. And I know that's going to be the concern of everybody else. And where are they going to go? The gas station that just happens to be coming in. So
The brand new fresh.
And that's why, you know, when you look for a planning commissioner, you look for someone that has, you know, qualities, right? But it takes a neutral position and/or looking at the benefit of the community, right? Because a lot of times, you know, I can't put the staff down or anything. They look at it as how this fits to the general plan. How is this better to mitigate traffic, right? And they're going to give you their recommendations, right? You, on the other hand, it is your duty to get informed to see whether or not that recommendation makes sense with the community and or the general plan. So that's why those decisions are tough, and that's why I commend not only you, Rohi, Abel, but any other person that's in that has civic service, you know, within, you know, positions like planning commission, civil service, any advisory, or even elected officials. They're not always, you know, they're out there because they want to do something for the community. And sometimes they're not always everybody's cup of coffee, but everyone's out there trying to make a betterment for the community, right?
Yeah, you know, somebody recently had told me, you know, the people who are the loudest at these meetings and speak up the most don't necessarily make up the masses, right? And that's very important for you guys to know, viewers, because if you're not showing up to these meetings and participating, you're allowing your neighbor who maybe you don't agree with to speak on your behalf. Right? I mean, literally, that's what you're allowing. If you're not participating, showing up to vote, you know, speaking your mind, the people who you don't agree with that are part of your district are now influencing the decisions that are being made, right? So you do have that civic duty to participate and voice your opinion and give your opinion or your side of it and say, hey, I'm vegetarian.
That's right. I like that. I like that. Yeah. Abel grew up at Sizzlers, and that's always a steak, right? It was always a steak.
Sizzlers, man. So, anyway, fellas. Well, I think we did a pretty good job of kind of, you know, outlining, you know, how things kind of work a little bit, at least with some of the things that we see on a day to day. But I think today served a purpose of really opening the conversation to the public here. And we want your guys' opinion. We want your guys' feedback. And again, if you're too shy to go to the council meetings or whatever and stand at the podium, just drop a comment down below. And, you know, we're not here to beat anybody up, but we will respond and we will, you know, kind of work through whatever rabbit holes you have for us. All right?
Yeah, and let this be the channel that you can vet out your frustrations at whatever you may see. And I'm not saying don't do it in a public setting. I'm just saying if you don't want to take that route, join us. Come on in. You know, this is a weekly jargon. This is what we do. We'll do it every week. And if there's a topic you want us to discuss, bring it by. If it's something that's within our realm of what we do, then we'd be more than happy to bring an expert if you like. But drop a comment, have a like, share, subscribe.
We'll see you guys next Wednesday.